Pastor Matthew Stuckey here, and in this video I want to talk to you about wife beating in the Quran. There's a pretty controversial verse in the Quran, Surah 4 verse 34, or chapter 4 verse 34, that tells husbands to beat their disobedient wives. So let me just read you this verse from the Sahih International, which is the most common translation of the Quran into English. It says here in 434, men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other, and what they spend for maintenance from their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them. Then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand. So it says first, advise wives or rebuke wives, correct them, then forsake them in bed, and then you strike them or beat them. Now, the defense I've always heard from Muslims in regard to this verse is that the implication in the verse is that when you beat your wife, when you strike your wife, you do it in a gentle way such as this. No, honey, don't do that. You need to listen to me. Like you would do to a very young child where you're just trying to give a slight correction without actually causing any sort of pain. But there's two major problems with this justification by Muslims. The number one is that there's progressive punishment in this verse. It says first you advise them. Advising them meaning you correct them. Advising them meaning you rebuke them. You tell them that they are wrong. Then you go to another level, you say you forsake them in bed. And so of course, when you're raising kids, if they do something wrong, you punish them. And if they do it again, you punish them to a greater deal. And so you forsake them in bed, that's step number 2. And then number 3, you strike them. Well, it wouldn't make any sense to forsake them in bed and then go, no, honey, don't do this. Obviously, in this verse, you're looking at progressive punishment that is getting worse and worse. So obviously, when it's saying strike them, it's not just a little love tap or gentle tap. It's actually saying to beat your wife if she's disobedient and cause her to obey you out of fear. Now, the other problem with this is the fact that when they say that the text implies gently, they're not saying that the Arabic language implies that when you beat your wife, you beat her in a gentle way. What they're saying is that culturally it was understood that when you beat your wife, you beat her in a gentle way. So basically, it could just read, hey, beat your wife, and everybody reading that would understand that, oh, when I beat my wife, it's saying, no, honey, don't do this. Now, some of the modern versions of the Quran into English, because if you just directly translate it from Arabic into English, it's just going to say to beat your wife, to strike your wife. And they started adding the word gently because obviously it's horrified English readers that have read this where it's like, whoa, beating your wife. And they're like, no, but the text implies gently. But if you speak to people that speak Arabic, they're going to tell you that in Arabic, it doesn't have an implication of gentle. They say that because of culturally. Well, what about if you were in a culture that viewed beating your wife as something that was not gentle? They would just read that and they would have justification for beating their spouse. But see, the Bible exists outside of culture. It doesn't matter what culture says. The Bible exists on its own. And so the idea that the Quran can only exist in a certain culture where people understood that shows that it can't be the word of God because it's not universal to all people. No, it clearly says in Surah 4 verse 34 to beat your wife if she's disobedient, but you're never going to find anything like that in the word of God, the true word of God, the Bible. Thank you and God bless.